If you value these conversations, subscribe and leave a review. It helps more than you think. You can also visit Jeansland.co and sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter. It gives you access to our full archive, along with the development shifts and stories shaping the denim supply chain in real time. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram to stay connected between episodes. Welcome to another podcast for Jeansland. Yesterday, I was sipping my coffee in my pajamas and I caught up, as I always do, with my mail and messages before the sun rose. And then I found this LinkedIn story that a friend suggested I read by a guy I'd never heard of in Pakistan. His name is Umer Farooq Qureshi. Am I saying your name right, Umer?
Yes.
Okay, great. The story that he wrote was about Levi suppliers and what these suppliers should know about doing business with Levi's. And that really drew my interest. The story was exceptional, and I learned from the story. And like all good learnings, it made me want to learn more. So the way the world is today, I made a couple of phone calls, boom, 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 and with friends in Pakistan. And the next thing you know, I'm talking to the author of the story myself 30 minutes after I first read it. Umer helps businesses disrupt themselves before they get disrupted by the market. In the earlier part of his career, he was part of the disruption pattern in the telecom industry, and he then transitioned to business process reengineering and change management with the textile group that led him to eventually joining Neela Blue by Supplier as its founding member when they set it up as a greenfield project. He then headed their EU marketing and sales department and then eventually moved to go to his own software company that helps textile companies and brands in anti-counterfeiting, DPP, brand protection, and traceability solutions. Even more interesting, Umer's family has been in textiles for 3 generations. His grandfather migrated from India during partition to join one of the 3 textile mills based in Pakistan. What makes Umer super interesting is that he believes the textile industry is going through the same playbook he witnessed in the early days of his career. And he shares his thoughts on LinkedIn, where he tries to raise awareness to act as an early warning alarm, attempting to induce suppliers to pivot and avoid being disrupted. Because the subject is topical, I asked Umer if he would do a podcast with me as soon as possible. And here we are 24 hours later, talking to him. And I'm very, very pleased to have him, very pleased that he was available. And Umer, congratulations on writing something super useful and incredibly appreciated. Can you tell us why you wrote that? What prompted that?
Thanks a lot, Andrew, for first of all inviting me over to this podcast. It's indeed an honor and a pleasure. Uh, Frankly speaking, the intention to write a post was uh, not from the investor's point of view, but from a supplier's point of view. These retailers and customers uh, try to put up a lot of fancy and sugar coated reports about the way they like to project, but always there is something hidden in it. And from the supplier's point of view, I just wanted to highlight all those things that don't make up in the headlines, but act as an early warning system for the suppliers at large, so they can get some idea and prepare for themselves.
All right. Let's get to the story. The story was about Levi's, the denim monolith. And in this story, there were 2 points that super interested me. The first one was about gross margins. The story talks about Levi's proudly boasting that their gross margin had grown to 62.1% in the first quarter of 2025, which is a monumental achievement. It's fabulous for shareholders. And the data says that 52% of that came from DTC, for direct to consumers, up from 44%. Clearly, they've decided that direct to consumers is the way to go, and they're slowly changing their balance between wholesale and direct to consumers, which is an interesting trajectory. The second point is that as the margins go up, the cost of goods obviously has to go down, which begs the question to ask Levi's, okay, guys, you're getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. How is that going for your suppliers? Now, we both know a lot of suppliers, Umer and and I might add that in the supply chain, the garment factories, laundries, textile mills, I would assume their margins are between 10 and 18%. Do you agree on that, Umer?
Yes, I do. On the average, these are the margins, the value chain. operates at. But the way garment makers think about it is in terms of cut, make, and sew, which they call it CMW, because the other parts of the material cost that are fabrics and accessories are more of a standardized cost. So they are more or less same across all the garment makers. And normally what the brands and retailers do is for each style they ask for the CMW value of how per style any particular factory may charge against the volumes they place an order.
So if Levi's improves their margin by 10% or 5%, and the supplier's margin is, let's say, 18% or 15%, that's like a 30% reduction for the supply chain.
Yes,
Would you
definitely.
agree?
The issue that we should be very peculiar about is that someone in the value chain has paid the price for it. And maybe we can also argue that it's a basic product mix distribution that has led to Levi's increased in their top line revenue, because previously on year basis, if they are able to sell 10 more percent uh, by improvement in their DTC mix, it means that they are able to sell for that incremental value at the retail value without giving any discounts to the wholesaler and stuff. So it's one way they push the suppliers, and the other way they also improve their distribution across their distribution channels, which contributed to this cross margin which they proudly claim.
So when Levi's makes a boast to the stock market about how much margin they're making, how do suppliers react to that?
Well, in the current scenario, we all know the inflationary environment we are living in. The cost of living crisis is, I think, more or less globally, everyone is facing the heat. The cost of utilities, labor since COVID has increased a lot for everyone. And I think in these times, in particular, when as a supplier or as a human being, your cost of living and cost of organization's expense have gone up, a brand like Levi's boasting that they were able to increase their margins looks like that they are celebrating at the cost of their suppliers, because suppliers must not be happy. At these times, generically speaking, I'd be expecting that they would come up with something that they went well along with their suppliers. They tried to help in, they chip in, and contributed to their ever increasing costs.
Well, yeah, it would be interesting to read. Our margin went up 62% while we also paid the cost of inflation so that our suppliers did not go backwards.
Yes, absolutely. This would have sounded perfectly well for everybody in the chain, including the suppliers. And but the way I look at and my experiences, it's not the same story.
No, because they're basically saying we went our margin 62.5%, Mr. Stockholder. That's the good news. And we did whatever is necessary, even in inflation, to force those people down just so we could make
Yes,
you happy.
yes,
That's basically what
absolutely.
they're saying. All
So
right.
if I'm a supplier, I'll be very worried and uh, not happy definitely at all that my customers who think, and we both think that we are partners as such, is making celebrations at my own cost.
Totally. Totally. You mentioned something in the article about a portal, an online portal. What was that?
Well, Levi's has been going through a phase of digital transformation since COVID. So it's not something that they just did. It's part of that transformation effort that is in place since for past couple of years, and they call it Project Fuel. So part of that Project Fuel is a tapering of management layers and a leaner system that they projected that will help them taper off around $100 million from their cost. So they announced, I think, precisely 11 months ago that they are launching an enterprise planning system that will give them a visibility and a tool to place orders and do a bidding system where suppliers will be competing for the orders.
The bidding system is closed, of course. So it's not like an auction. When you go to an auction for a piece of art, everybody's in the room, or basically that it's announced what the last bid is. Levi's system, I don't think, is like that, right?
Yes, absolutely. So what it does is that it has a fixed window where uh, they don't tell who quoted the price, but they give you as an indication that you lie as a green, yellow, as an indication of where you lie in based on their target price. And it's just within that same window, suppliers wherever they are in Bangladesh, Pakistan, Egypt have to compete for that price. So it's like race to the bottom, where supplier based on his position of orders and his expectations and how much capacity he has allocated for Levi's will try his best to grab the order, and
Well, let me
and
ask.
that's the only way.
Okay, let me ask you a question. If you're a supplier, say you're a supplier in Vietnam, and you've been supplying Levi's for 11 years, and do you have to bid for your order? You're running basic items every day.
That's the thing that is pinching the suppliers the most, because all of a sudden Levi's has transitioned to a system where the relationship, the investments in relationship system, compliance and everything has taken a back seat, and all Levi's is caring for that target price which they want to meet because they want to improve their margins. So if you are a supplier who has been with me for 11 years, but and is invested in everything for me, uh, definitely your price won't be as compared to any other supplier who has just joined me and doesn't meet the same in investments in compliance and regulations, but is able to bid for that price.
Wow. Wow. That's crazy. Okay. We'll let that sit in the air for a second. Let's go back to margins some more. Yesterday, after we talked, I researched margins, and Levi's, of course, is the king, well, almost the king. They have a 62.1% margin, but PVH is at 61. So basically just marginally less. And on the retail front, Abercrombie is at 64%. Inditex, H&M, and Uniqlo are in the mid 50s. Gap and AEO are 41 and 39, just above Kohl's. How does Inditex, H&M, and Uniqlo get such a great margin, and how is their reputation on the suppliers as far as price goes?
Well, based on my little experience and the conversations I have in the industry, I think Inditex has been a pioneer of this distribution channel thing where they are always selling to the retailers. They don't operate in the wholesale channel, and they are the ones who have mastered this art of discipline where they have minimum markdowns. They try to sell closest to the retail price most of the times, and the way they work, they are always bringing products that are trending, and that's why they are considered the best in terms of their margins. It's only Levi's and other US brands that are learning this trade, because uh, everybody is now facing a threat of another competitor which is not as such a brand or a retailer, which is more of a Sheen and the other marketplace tech players that are coming and threatening them. And since they are pure play, they are DTC influencer driven tech systems, every retailer brand is now forced to pivot to a distribution model where they, in order if they have to make money, they have to sell more through a DTC distribution channel, direct to customer, rather than depending on the other traditional distribution models like wholesale. So that's why you see the margins in all those retailers and brands that have been doing this prior to Levi's.
But Uniqlo doesn't really do fashion, and yet Uniqlo has the same margin as Inditex.
Yes, but if you compare it with in terms of denims, they don't do as much denims as any of the other retailers and brand as well. Like
Good.
they are a function performance oriented retailer where they have their airism and heat tech kind of a product, and and as far as I remember, they have the same set of suppliers. I think ISCO is the one who supplies them, their biggest fabric supplier, and there is no much product innovation and seasonality and fashion into when you look at the denim lines, and they have their very peculiar set of customers who are very loyal to them, and their sizes are very different from the traditional European and US retailers.
They're very, very, very loyal, incredibly loyal. So as a new
Yes.
supplier, incredibly hard to sell to them. And if you're an old supplier, you have a really long-term relationship. I always joke that you get an order from Uniqlo, and it's so long that you can build a new factory during the course of the order.
Yes, I remember I was talking to someone in ISCO, and he told me it took them 10 years to break into Uniqlo.
Yeah. So why do you think that Abercrombie and Fitch's margin is so great, and the Gap and AEO are way down?
I think Abercrombie and Fitch is an exceptional story. We don't talk much about it, but if you look at their stock performance for the last 2 years, their stock price grew by 400%. Like that, it's phenomenal. And it's one of those transformation stories which we don't celebrate much or talk about, but they really transformed themselves, pivoted into the emerging categories of Gen Z and millennials, uh, opted for these influencer marketing channels, TikTok, and all those tools where these new generations, the generations we call Gen Z, spend their time. And they change their styling, marketing, and branding. And and that's why the market and the shareholders, the Wall Street, really appreciated them. Like Nvidia is the only company that I think has as a more around 600% return. And if you look at the 2 years time, and next is like 400% return from Abercrombie and Fitch, which is phenomenal in our apparel and retail industry.
Crazy, crazy. All right, let's go back to the supply chain subject. If the supply chain is supposed to survive long term, and I'm not sure they are, what is it that they can do to maintain their margins? I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's kind of like kings and commoners. So let's say Levi's, Wrangler, Gap, they're all the kings, and all the people in the supply chain are the commoners. The game right now is that the king is supposed to make all the money, and the commoners are allowed to survive only if they do what the king say. And each commoner is pitted against the other commoner for their services to give to the king so that they make less and he makes more. So, how does this play out in the future?
You're absolutely right, Andrew.
What's the option for the commoner who can't afford to keep playing the game when the lowest bidder always wins?
You're absolutely right, and unfortunate it is that now this difference is even widening more. Like we are in the and the things are not globally doing well as well. And in spite of that, we have a retailer that has posted 62% gross margins. That speaks about how much is the disparity and the disconnect that exists between the commoners and the king. And I feel like suppliers will have to realize and look into their existing business models, because all of the factories and the verticals we see around were built around the premise of this globalization, where the countries like Pakistan, India, China, and Bangladesh used to be the supply centers, and they used to supply goods to US and Europe. But now that old world order is breaking apart, I would say, and the new one is still in under progress. So suppliers, and we have other countries like China, which to an extent are creating an example of new business models where they themselves have decided that they will transition forward into the value chain and maybe work as private labels or establish themselves on these marketplaces like Amazon, TikTok, Sheen, where the Gen Z spends most of their money, and create those tribes and creator economies where, based on a certain micro niche or niche, they can sell to them and resonate with their lifestyles. Till the time suppliers don't think of themselves and about their own future, they'll keep getting bullied by, I don't want to name it, but if Levi's is doing it today, the other brands and retailers will follow it tomorrow.
That was my point, is that when Levi's announces a 62.5% margin or whatever it is, don't the other brands all have a meeting? And the
Of
president
course.
say to them, "What's wrong with you? How come you're doing 42% when Levi's is doing 61 and they're selling to somebody else?" I mean, if you're a retailer and you're seeing that a wholesaler is making 60 something percent, like PVH and Levi's, that should put a lot of pressure and say, We're not buying properly. We're not tough enough. We're not mean enough. We're not like aggressive enough. We're not threatening enough. We're not auctioning enough. Is that what's going on in other brands as well?
I think not exactly right now, but there is no way it might not transition to them, because if you are a publicly listed company, certainly if you are the CEO of Cap or any other company, the pressure will come down to you. The very next day, Levi's announces 62% gross margin. That what are you doing, and how are you preserving the shareholders' wealth maximization? So maybe if not today, tomorrow the same customer gonna come to that supplier that if you can squeeze yourself for Levi's, what's the problem for not doing it for me?
Exactly.
So this is an unsustainable trajectory where the entire sustainability of the business is at stake.
We won't even talk about sustainability for sustainability, environmental sake, because how can you afford to invest in your factory if you're being pushed down on your margin? But I think
Let
I think there's a solution here, and I don't know what you think about my solution. But there's a whole movement in consumer goods, in all consumer goods, for transparency. And this is something which is really dear to my heart. Why can't buying meetings be transparent? Why does it have to be behind closed doors? Most auctions are transparent. Why can't, I mean, you can have an auction. I don't think there's anything wrong with an auction. But why can't everybody be in the same room? Why do you, why can't the brands turn this aggressive hunt for margins into an opportunity to raise brand value instead of decrease brand value? Because by doing this sounds like you're winning that particular quarter, but long term, you're affecting your brand. And it's going to come out, whether it comes out through an NGO or it comes out through the workers. Eventually, it's going to come out that the king commoner concept is going on and the commoners are being suffocated. If that comes into the public domain, that causes enormous brand value decrease. Just like social behavior, like if you don't have a quality over your the way you treat your workers. This is the reason people got so interested in CSR, because they didn't want to affect brand equity. Negotiating in a ferocious manner, while clever to the stock market, has the possibility to seriously impact brand value. If you're on CNN and they talk about how you treat your suppliers and how they're losing money based on inflation while you're winning on margin, but you can turn that around if you simply negotiate in a transparent way. What do you think of that?
You're absolutely right, Andrew. And there is one more thing as well, which I think Levi's should be wary of, is the fact that maybe in financial terms and spreadsheets they have been able to get the margins they were looking for, but obviously, if you push the suppliers to the corner and to a limit, you might get compromised on the quality. We have seen many cases in the past where when brands and retailers try to look at their product through the financial angles only, they compromise on the product integrity and and their customers. They are very smart to identify it, and eventually in the longer run, they pay the price in terms of switching over to other brands and retailers. So and by the time the retailers and the brand recognize that this is the issue, it's very late. So if you average out these things over a longer term, you're absolutely right that every brand should maintain a balance between its short term and long term targets, and treat suppliers as more of their partners rather than pushing them for some quarter wise target
Well,
which they want to show on the Wall Street.
sorry, but I really try to delete the word partnership from our industry, because a partnership would infer that the supply chain benefits from the 62% margin. It's exactly the opposite. So
Absolutely.
I don't see the word partnership in in a transactional basis, when the whole point for the buyer is to make as much margin as they can, no matter what it means to the supply chain. So I don't find that as a partnership, but that's another story. Let's move to the US dollar if we can for a second. So
Yeah,
India
sure.
and Pakistan have really been, how can I say, using the predictability of the dollar going up as their margin. And now, with the administration that we have, it looks like, and I think it's a good bet, that the dollar over the next 18 months is going to drop. So if you were taking an order in the past for, say, $10, and you expected by the time you actually had to hatch the money, get your money, you were going to make $10.50. That 50 cents is part of your space. What's going to happen now?
Well, very interesting observation, Andrew, and you're right, because now this is a scenario which most of the suppliers based in our part of the world never expected to happen. Dollar, if you talk about with the particular in Pakistan, we had this average around 8 to 10% depreciation of Pak rupee as compared to dollar, and if even if they don't build it into a margin, it used to give them some space or some added benefit in terms of if as a margin. But now, if the dollar, which already has depreciated in the first 4 months as compared to euro and Japanese yen, and Fed may cut the rates and it might depreciate a lot, but it will put pressure because this is a situation that has never happened before to any of the suppliers, and I'm sure there is no one who can tell them as well what to do with it, because there are no people who have that prior experience of dealing with such a situation. So on one side, they have these imported materials which are pegged to dollars, and we might not know even if we have to import the U.S. cotton to trade.
You do this. Just sorry to interrupt you, but this is something which I think is funny in a peculiar business way. Is that as the dollar goes down, our the American administration is definitely tying U.S. cotton to negotiations. So as the rise of U.S. cotton goes to India, goes to Bangladesh, in fact, all these countries are begging the U.S. government, "Oh, give us free trade or better terms on the duties. We'll buy more and more cotton from you, soybeans from you, whatever." So it's very predictable that there's going to be more U.S. cotton. Plus, China's not taking it because of the duty. So where is all this U.S. cotton going to go? It's got these places. That means
Demand will be definitely more than the supply, because everybody wants to have the U.S. cotton to balance that trade deficit.
yes, and the dollar is going to go up. So that means that and plus cotton right now is at a very low price. So the long term predictability would be one, cotton price has to go up sooner or later. Two, that the U.S. dollar is going to go down. Three, the two combinations will make prices go crazy up. And then what happens to the supply chain?
The problem is that all these economies are based on the assumption that they need to be export oriented. So one assumption is that if the US dollar depreciates, these countries might depreciate their currency even further, because otherwise they won't remain export competitive. So we
Well,
will go into this vicious circle where the fiat currencies will flatten, and we might end up with something else. But I don't want to get into that rabbit hole at the moment. But even right now, euro is getting appreciated, and so is Japanese yen, and these economies are very much worried because it hurts their competitiveness as compared to US dollars. So it's an uncharted territory where we are heading towards, where we'll have a situation where our input cost, if they are imported and are pegged to dollar, which they are for like utility, for cotton if we import it, and dyes and chemicals and all that, except labor, will be rising as compared to the price we will get by the time we ship our goods. So I think uncertainty is the only thing that I think will be the constant feature of in future times, and the resilience uh, companies might have, or some cushion they might have, will help them steer through this crisis. But definitely we are entering into a phase where things won't be as predictable as they used to be, and we might need a lot of uh, intelligence thought process on behalf of suppliers to mitigate that crisis that we might end up into.
all right, last question. we have basically three major suppliers in the subcontinent. We have India, Bangladesh, Pakistan. If you photograph where they are today, where are they going to be as far as the jeans business 2 years from now?
I think uh, Bangladesh as a country is dependent on this business. So I think more than even Pakistan and Bangladesh, they are the ones who have the highest stake in this business, and they will go to any extent not to lose that. Uh, then comes Pakistan, because textile contributes a big chunk to our export industry, and apart from export, it's the biggest sector which employs most of the people. So governments of both of these countries will go to any extent to make a deal with US, so that, because it has the political repercussions as well. Uh, if the textile industry is not stable, it can hurt the political sentiments of the people, and cause a lot of disruption. About India, I think India has so much internal consumption at the moment. Uh, they are building right now for the next 5 to 10 years, where the government is giving subsidies and encouraging them to export as well. So in the next 2 years window, uh, I see them preparing for that next wave of industry, where we will see lot of tech ready, forward. Digitally transformed, and high tech kind of garment setups are being set up in India. But since they have a lot of internal consumption and such a great growth rate, uh, there for the next 2 years, I think they'll be no problem for them as compare as their industry is concerned. In fact, the all these retailers and brands will be looking forward to make pact with them through the trade deal India and US are going to sign, to make sure that they get some incentives to work in India, because right now, working with India and in India is not that easy.
Why do you say that?
Well, the Indian government has had made some laws where you have to, there is a certain percentage of the business you have to do some local JV. Even Sheen and Timu have partnered up with, I think, one of the three companies, the biggest ones in India, and it's not as open as Pakistan or Bangladesh, where you can just go and open the stores and start doing business. So I think that from the US side, US will be looking forward that India opens up more, because they have the highest middle class at the moment as we are speaking, and their growth rate is phenomenal, and it's the next frontier market for every brand and retailer who is looking to grow, whether it's Zara or Levi's or anyone else.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. In summary, what I'd like to see and what I think you agree with is open negotiations. I'd like to see the day when a buyer who's buying commodity products sits down with four or five of their major suppliers. It's, let's say, four or five denim suppliers in Vietnam. They all sit down together. They talk as a real partnership of what they're trying to achieve, and they negotiate all the entire supply chain all together. That would be something that we could be proud of as an industry, that we're all fair and open and everybody's treated the same way. That would be great.
Well, in theory, yes, but life is unfair, Andrew. Don't you agree? And in the model we have in the world, uh, if the incentives are not redesigned the way that they give incentive to the behaviors you suggested, I'm afraid we how can we can see that day which you are idealizing, which looks so good to hear, but to be honest, uh, it's very hard to implement in the real terms.
Well, that's a shame because in the end, I think the way you buy is going to be treated the way Phil Knight was treated with labor in Indonesia in the 80s. And I think that it ties to brand equity. And I think losing your brand equity publicly because of mistreatment of supply will happen. And I think that there will be lessons from that. And contract sanctity and decency and behavior and negotiations will be part of a brand equity and very important to every brand. But we need a couple of sacrifices for that to happen, just like there was with Nike. That's my opinion.
Yes, might be one case is that in future, uh, these suppliers, wherever they are based, whether it's Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, will become the epicenters of consumer economy. Like if you talk about their population sizes and the percentage of how many of them are young, uh, they are the next frontier markets. And if the brands and retailers today don't treat their suppliers the way they should be, they might push suppliers to go and become a brand to an extent that they can launch it in their local markets and kill their future growth, which I think will be disastrous for them, because all their future growth markets will get tapered off, because the same supplier who learned the art from them all of a sudden became a competitor in the same market. We see that in India already, and India is way ahead of maybe Pakistan in terms of the demographics and the way the market plays. But you can't rule that out.
Absolutely not. Everybody should study the Arvind and Raymond model for sure.
Yes, yes, that's definitely a study for Bangladesh and Pakistani companies to follow and implement to whatever extent they can.
The other story that I think is also a wonderful story for our industry for the supply chain to consider is that when I was young in the business, people in the wool industry considered Loro Piana as too expensive without any future. And then you fast forward 40 years later, they sold their company for billions because they went into retail. So every supplier has roads to go. Anyway, Umer, it's really delightful to meet you. Thank you for the lessons that you gave me, and I hope we stay in touch. And I hope everything goes well for you. Thank you.
And thanks a lot, Andrew, again for inviting me over and giving me this chance to speak my heart out about something we both really care about, and your you know mm, initiatives to talk about the subjects that are not popular as such. These are the things don't make so much news, but are important for us and the industry we live in, we breathe in. So thanks to you for
Thank you.
inviting me over and giving me this airspace.
Thanks, Umer. And next time I'm in Pakistan, where do you live?
I'm based in Lahore.
Oh, great. The next time I'm there, we'll get together.
So kind of you. I look forward to see you.
Yeah, me too. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Bye.